Got a hibbity hibbity. Okay, and let me see. Make sure everything is fine. And that the world is not on fire. Okay.
Yeah, I see you online.
Okay, so...
I don't see the video, but I see you online.
Okay.
Yeah, I see you online.
Okay, there we go. Now I can see it.
I don't see the video. Now I got you.
There we go. So, yeah, let me... I've closed something. Give me just a second.
Great to be here, Bob.
Yeah. So, while I'm doing this, do you want to, like, tell people a little bit about yourself? Maybe, some linkage, possibly? Where they can find you if they want to?
Everyone familiar with me can find me on Gideon's Discord. We should get that linked up. Other than that, I am simply little old me, the Navali human barbarian, lost in the wilderness.
Yes. So, should we get on to the questions then?
Sure, sounds good to me.
All right. So, first of the questions. How do you think a good friend would describe Syr?
I don't know. The best friends that I've had in the game have been my compatriots in battle. There's not really been a lot of lounge time where we sit and chat about our hobbies. I am very quiet, and I think I would be described as quiet. I would be very subdued until battle starts, and then I get a little more active and a little more vocal. Previous circumstances would have limited me a little bit, but I think you guys are starting to see me spread my wings as time goes on. So I'm basically just a warrior who's looking for a fight.
Okay. Second question is, what's something unique about your character you think people who've watched sessions might not know because you haven't gotten to show it, or it just sort of got overlooked? Something you think is unique about your character that people might not know?
Sire's got an idea for the long game. He's still got plans that he hasn't really touched on because he's been pretty caught up in the other achievements, the other missions. As time goes on, his personality is starting to shine through, and you're going to see, without spoiling anything, you're going to see some changes in his outlook and his goal.
Do you think that certain aspects have already changed? To
Oh
some
yeah,
regard?
it's you can definitely see a change already from being more of a devoted follower, seeing he who shall not be named get struck in the tree on session 1, and pretty much pledging himself to protecting and following who he.
You cut off after who he.
Who won't be named. He got struck. And I became a devoted follower, of his whim, which didn't really work out for me. It kept me pretty quiet and pretty backstage to what ended up being pretty much a wrong path for Sire.
Yeah, which I always found to be very interesting. The next question would be if your character had gotten the wish in the PvP, or just a wish in general, right? What do you think that it would have been used on if it hadn't been for a spell purpose?
The wish in the PvP session, Sire was completely devoted to battle. I'm still on the fence. I don't think I would have recovered anybody, but I would definitely have wished for probably 20 to 25 more Navali warriors on top of the cliff, with direct orders to go where I pointed.
Yeah, I think that may have even changed how things went in general. I think you guys would have definitely just like we would have been forced to retreat at that point. I don't think we would have had any sort of chance at beating you had that happened.
Yeah, the PvP battle in and of itself was kind of chaotic. I think, given 30 seconds to think about it, the only other thing that Sire may have wished for was the storm to be over and gone.
It's very interesting to think about.
Well, I don't like Stormo, so I wouldn't have invited him to the party.
They may have actually even made the fight a little bit more even, seeing that a lot of the problems that arise later in the fight that people were facing were the effects from the storm, like Sin having nearly no chance at climbing down those walls, basically just was forced to jump off every single time, and that ended up killing him.
Yeah. Exactly. I think as the storm progressed, it became obvious that the fighters were going to be struggling, and that magic was regaining a little bit of strength in the battle. So it was a little lopsided. I can't complain about it. I think it went as well as it could. But I think as one of the fighters versus one of the casters, I would have been concentrating on something to reverse that imbalance.
I think that one interesting aspect of that fight could have been if for every storm effect that was rolled, for instance, like one of the magic effects, like the Featherfall, if it had happened twice, one per side. That way, if things just happen to all land on one guy on one side of the fight, you can avoid that from happening, and then the fight not be as lopsided.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the way things rolled out anyway was that everything that did happen in the storm, except for a Featherfall, never touched me. So it was just kind of Stormo playing games with everybody else, but he didn't want to play with me.
And I always thought it was funny because a couple people thought that it was Tella that got the Featherfall, and that therefore the damage he took because of the falling down the cliff when he did shouldn't have counted. But I have done the math, and even if you subtract the damage that I took, just what I took from that first hit was enough to still vaporize me.
Yeah, I miss you, man.
Yeah. Next question is there anything your character does while not in battle, such as during traveling? Little habits, things that may be interesting.
Oh yeah, I mean, believe it or not, Sire plays to his backstory too. He is an avid collector of plants and berries and medicinal herbs. He's pretty much grown to avoid mushrooms at all costs, but he's a collector. So he does carry a medicine bag at all times. He has a collection of just random leaves and berries that he will, for lack of a better description, try before he determines what it's used for, which is one of his biggest traits, is that he's careless with poison. So if he sees a new leaf he doesn't recognize, the first thing he'll do is either eat it or rub it on his skin, just to see what happens.
I think
I'm constantly doing that when I'm not fighting.
I think that may be interesting if in like some of the coming sessions during some of the travel sequences, if you were to bring that up and be like, hey, can I look for some like poisonous berries to coat my weapon with? I think that'd be kind of cool.
In time, I've still got a plan.
Yeah. In what's interesting is, since it's a fantasy setting, so he could play it up as some berries may have an extra like effect to it, like paralytic, or even assuming that they were like very rare, even something that may turn somebody to stone. That could be interesting.
Exactly. Some of the more lethal poisons, I want to beef up levels just a little bit, so that as I start hardcore experimenting with some of this plant life, I don't just outright kill myself.
Yeah, I could see why you'd want to avoid that. But
yeah, I still collect them. I just haven't really explored them much in the wanderings and recoveries that we've been doing recently.
Yeah. The next question is, what does your character think of the other parties within the campaign? From like an out of character perspective, things that that Syr might not. If he did, what do you think his thoughts would be?
Oh, if Syr knew about the other parties in the game, with the open knowledge, as if he was watching the stream, I think the other parties would probably be okay for the most part. I haven't seen any real zealots or religious the God way or no way kind of reaction, which I think wouldn't end well for them. But as far as the characters themselves, other than the growing knowledge that he has now about some certain races that live in a floating city, they would fare okay, at least long enough to say a few words before anything started. But beyond that, I don't see anybody that he would be hunting down. Well, I take that back, but no spoilers. I don't see anybody majorly that he would be hunting down just from an annoyance factor.
There was a I forget exactly who it was that said it, but there was a comparison between Syr and Red, because Syr is like not up for the gods in general, yet he's in a group full of people that are working with Venumbra, and spoilers by the way, but then Red is on the opposite end of the spectrum, where his group is all not working with the gods, yet he now has this connection through the spear to Venumbra.
Now, see, again, with a spoiler warning, Venumbra's not a god. So he, as arrogant as he was that walked into that encounter, was expecting just another bad guy. He had no intention whatsoever of opening up any kind of implication of, yes, I'll worship you, yes, I'll follow you. And he hasn't with Daystress either. For those who haven't watched the sessions, don't listen. For those that have, then you know that I've pledged an alliance, but I have not pledged
fealty.
Fealty. And it's because of my history as sire that he questions anybody that says, follow me, on multiple levels, whether it be the mortals saying go this way or the gods saying, worship me or die. He's Navali. Sire has no problems with dying because he's.
You cut off after because he's
not afraid of dying either. He's got goals. He's got goals in death too. So let them kill him.
Yeah.
He's got no qualms. He's got no qualms about it.
I think it would be interesting if somebody who had immense power but wasn't a god offered him part of their power, if there would be a different, such as like if, of course this is complete hypothetical and would likely never happen, but if somebody such as like Royce, who commands a large force, was like, hey, how would you like to be one of my like captains or something, I think it'd be interesting to see what that interaction would go like.
Royce is shorter than me. He'd have to be a pretty good talker.
Do not come
and
in.
I would, Sire would have to
Do
know
not.
the motivation.
Don't come in.
What's in it for me to join?
Okay, thank you. No, I'm doing something. Please.
You're muted.
Yes. Apologies. I had a thing. However, the next question is from your good buddy Tanazal. From your character's point of view, is there anything he would change or have done differently?
I think from an in-session point of view, in character, I would have stayed closer to Tanazal during the fight. Sire's belief would have been that if I'd have stayed closer, then Stormo would have stayed further away, and things would have ended differently. As far as, I think that's the main focus. He lived through the death of 3 of his brothers. One of them, not a big deal.
One of which he was thinking about doing himself, from my understanding.
I think everybody was. It was getting to a breaking point. But Tanazal, even in the sessions prior to that, Tanazal and Sire were compatriots. We worked very well together, and when he laid him to rest, he was heartbroken, and it pretty much solidified his anger about what caused the death of his brothers in general. But Tanazal hit hard. He was upset.
I think that had Buka survived that fight, it would have been very, very interesting to see that contention, and then quite possibly see Sire Cap or even Tanazal murder the chosen one of the Navali. Though technically with the wish, things are a little funky, but
yeah, exactly. It's I don't know who you're talking about because he never existed.
Exactly.
I don't think he would have survived. As the PvP session started out, Sire and Degatoga both made it perfectly clear that they were a little fed up with the attitude of combat before conversation. I think if we'd have had a little bit more control over that mentality, things would have not even escalated to that point.
I think it would have been very, very interesting if instead of him being the chosen one, if even Tanazol or even Syr had been the chosen one, things might have gone drastically different, I feel like.
Yeah, Sire's loyalty to him, to the chosen one, not necessarily the character, but the chosen one, did shift when Degatoga took over the legend after the wish. Was blind loyalty. There was no reason not to. I think his anger towards the gods would have been in a different form if they had survived, but it still would have been there, just a little bit more unfocused and not as aggressive, because there wouldn't have been a reason to. He wouldn't have been betrayed, so the elevated anger wouldn't have been there.
That is honestly incredibly interesting to think about. Do you think that with recent endeavors, you think that Syr would have wished he'd acted differently in any recent endeavors?
In post PvP?
Yes.
I think the biggest regret now, it hasn't been confirmed yet, but I think the biggest regret now is that we're on the verge of finding out whether or not a second village has been vanquished while he was away. His quest to lead and to find a home, has maybe taken another turn, and we've got to refocus that. So we need more information before I can fully react. But there's some disappointment growing in Syr from not being able to focus on his priorities and starting to feel trapped in somebody else's.
Almost that he feels maybe not on the same level, but like in a similar way as how he felt when with Buka.
Yeah, in a different form, but he's feeling tortured because he keeps getting pulled away from the tribe. And first the Navali, now the river folk. He keeps getting pulled away and not being there to what he feels is the importance of protecting them and growing the tribe, which is what his ultimate goal has always been.
Do you think he feels at all guilty for what may have happened to either the Navali or for what happened to, or what may be happening to the River Tribe now?
Not guilt. He feels regret. He's torn between the alliance. He will not leave Tanazol now that he's got him back, sort of, and he feels torn in that loyalty and in the importance of protecting his new tribe, wherever that may be, from the wrath of the silly gods. He's away from home too long, and things are happening while he's away. So it's not guilt as much as just regret that one more thing has kept him away.
You mentioned your connection to Tanazol, and that sort of makes sense why you would stick around with him. But other than Tanazol's connection to Vulcrum, is there anything keeping you with Vulcrum and Cyrus as well, or is it less connected?
Cyrus is alive, so there's kind of there's a connection with Cyrus because he's alive. Mm-hmm. The long-term goal of being able to grow the tribe, being overshadowed at this point, but having somebody with him that has a similar outlook of survival is a pleasant one. Now, if it's enough to pull him away from Tanazol, I doubt it. But it's going to come down to what Tanazol wants. For now, Sire is content to storm the gates if that's what it takes. He's not leaving Tana. But we gotta go ahead.
There was talk of Tanazol possibly even betraying Vulcrum and attempting to kill him once he has his own freedom. Would you feel similar to how you did with Xando in that regard, or would it be less guilt, I guess, per se?
Oh, there would be no guilt. Not that I feel hostile towards Vulcrum, but Tanazol is still my brother. He is still Navali-ish. And we will stick together. He may not be the last living member, but he is the last living memory that Sire has of the Navali. And until that situation changes, he's with me and I'm with him.
That is a very, very, very interesting perspective, to be honest. That's one reason why I chose you as the first person, was because just how unique of a perspective you have on things, seeing that you're one of the only living members of your group.
I'm one of the only living members. Cyrus is too. Don't discount the short guy.
Of course.
But I am the last living Navali. So the memory of the tribe and the history of the tribe and the legend of the tribe has now kind of fallen on my shoulders. So he takes that with a lot of responsibility and a lot of focus. So there's not a lot he wouldn't do to keep that memory alive.
That's interesting to think about. Let's move on to the next question for now. What were your aims and goals when you first started, and where are they now? What reasons may have caused such a change?
Well, when I first started, I was the follower of the Chosen One. I'm the one who carried him to Xando and received the mission from the Bone Man. I was devoted. I had not been jaded. I had not been betrayed. I had not been angered by any happenstance. So I was a warrior of a warrior tribe. And that was his entire outlook. Short of being able to build the legend as one of the young guns, build the legend just like everybody else in Navali history has tried to do, which is the same reason Xando became Xando, working his way up the chain. He was on that journey. Things changed after PvP, and shortly before that.
Yeah, for sure.
When Stormo started betraying him, and the memory of his father, Sire's father, crept back in, being taken by the storm, the anger started growing, and it became too much to keep quiet. And then as the PvP session exploded, that was pretty much the changing point. And it was literally the fact that the anger was so great in Sire that as the storm moved around him, in his belief, Stormo was the only one involved. There was no magic. There was no other god. It was the storm, which he is directly connected to Stormo. Didn't touch him. There was no harm directly from the storm. And it's his belief. It's because Stormo knows that somewhere deep inside Sire, there's something growing that's going to be knocking on his door one day, that will take him out.
Do you think if things had went differently, that he may actually be in the same place of Xando prior to his fight with the Moon Shepherds?
Yes. I think if the transition had gone smoother and he had not been blinded by his fellowship to Bucklesu, if he had issued a fair challenge, I think the focus for the tribe would have been a little bit more ironed out. He still would have run into a situation with being jaded by the gods, but he would have had the tribe behind him, and it would have been done the right way. So there is a little regret there, that him taking out Xando would have been done differently, and he was a little blinded by Bucklesu's focus. But I think it wouldn't have changed the grand path. It just would have changed how he got there.
Do you think that the Navali may have had a different name had Syr been the leader?
No.
Not literally, but
yeah,
in a figurative sense.
I think the idea of conquest would have changed. It wouldn't have been, defeat every other tribe. It would have developed more into a diplomatic approach, in the tribal sense, where I think there would have been more focus on networking versus storming the gates of a different village and saying join us or die. That it didn't work out well, and it contributed to Xando dying, because failure still wouldn't have been tolerated. It just would have changed to a different approach.
Do you think if you would have taken charge, you would have spared Xando his life, or would you still have went through with what you did?
I wouldn't have been able to spare Xando's life. To the rights of the Navali, the path of ascension is to challenge and defeat. And if I had come out as a victor, no pun intended, if I had come out as the winner, then the tribe would have had no choice other than challenging me at that point, to rule.
Do you think if it was between you and say Orvik, or I think it was his name, right? Orvik, the main orc. Do you think that you still would have been able to say slay him?
Yeah, I would have still had Kitty, the hammer, and I think between that, it's still low level, but I think I would have depended a little bit more on the diplomatic approach if he had been challenged, and only fought as a last resort at that point. But I still would have suffered, but if I had succeeded, it would have definitely cemented me as one of the leaders.
Seeing that the Navali had a previous connection to orcs, and now the village that he is staying at sort of is quite possibly being attacked by them, do you think he has any particular, his opinion on orcs has changed in any way, or is it still about the same?
Have you met my blood brother, the half-orc?
Well, of course, but,
Yeah. I think that actually would help, if that's the case. The orcs have attacked a village that had no indication that it had orc influence. But I don't know how orcs would react if they came across a party that had one. You know what I mean?
True.
So there's a different approach. I don't know if I would be the one talking, because I'm still human, and the orcs definitely wouldn't know Navali from anybody else. But the familiarity with the orc culture, just inherent from the Navali tribe and from working with Tanazal, I think would help that encounter big time.
I definitely agree. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Gambit always says there's no big bad endgame boss in this campaign, and that everyone is a bad guy for someone else. So, does your character see? So, who does your character see as a bad guy, as the bad guy, and who do you think Sire would be a bad guy for, per se? And this question is from Red, by the way.
Oh, the only bad guy that Sire sees is Stormo. He is dedicated to his defeat. As far as characters in the game, his backstory, Sire doesn't know who to fight until whoever it is goes after one of his brothers, one of his compatriots, and then all bets are off. It's not a matter of being a bad guy. It's that he tried to either hurt him or one of the people he's traveling with, and that loyalty will never be challenged. Sire is gathering an army for a specific purpose, and the only way to make him a bad guy against anyone else is to get in his way. And getting in his way would include trying to take out a party member. So it's tricky to talk to Sire, or to try and attack anybody that he's traveling with.
So, if somebody offered Sire a shot at Stormo, per se, a possible, even like a battle with his avatar, his corporeal form, do you think that he would... What do you think he would wager upon that? Like, how important would that be to him?
It would be the only reason that he would be there. He wouldn't hesitate. If it's an avatar, he would fight without hesitation, or probably fight without an introduction, because he would still expect that if he died, he would be able to face Orvik himself. Being Navali, being Sire, death isn't the end of the war. He still sees the afterlife as the opportunity to directly approach the gods, and he's still got a bone to settle. I don't think that's ever going to go away.
Are there any other gods other than Stormo that he has a apprehension towards, per se?
He has antagonism towards anything that presents itself as a god, simply because he's only had the education and the run-in with one of them. He's only super familiar with Stormo, and if Stormo is an example of a god, then he's got no tolerance for any of them, because in their own way, they're all going to be that petty. They're all going to be that emotionless and that insensitive. Though they treat their worshippers as pawns in whatever scheme they're trying to run, and wouldn't hesitate, just like they did with the Navali, wouldn't hesitate to forsake them and simply turn their back, which is what started the path. Stormo turned his back on Sire, and Sire wasn't done talking yet.
There's been a lot of talk of the legitimacy or even existence of the gods in some cases. Do you think Sire would believe them in any regard, or do you think that he would just write it off as them just feeding him a bunch of horse crap?
It's a bunch of horse crap. There are no gods. There are simply children throwing tantrums, and just because they have control over the mortal world doesn't make them any better or any worse than any other encounter. Sire has the arrogance and arrogance isn't the right word, but he's got the snarkiness to think that even as a god, which kind of is why he approached Venumbra the way he did. Even as a god, if a god doesn't respect Sire, then the god isn't entitled to get respect from him.
Do you think that if he had met certain members of the campaign that are high elves, that he may have a similar perspective on them?
I don't think he would have the patience to sustain an encounter with the high elves.
You think it would immediately go to combat, or? I
think once exposed to that arrogance, it would hit a little too close to the god mentality. The arrogance would set him off.
Sort of the god complex sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I see that. Let's move on to the next question real quick. How did you come up with your character, and how different are they now from how you originally imagined them? Say, like, draft 1 of Sire Cap. How different is he now from how he was?
Draft 1 of Sire Cap was going to be just a straight brawler. He was going to be a fighter and nothing else. He was a Navali warrior who wanted to go and battle anything that he could find in the name of the Navali. The outcome was irrelevant. As he evolved, the barbarian aspect actually gave me a better picture of his mentality, of being focused on the loyalty to the tribe as a whole, but more of the legendary actions. As far as, a barbarian doesn't really do anything for themselves. It's more to build the memory and the legend that they are. So he became more involved with the history building of the tribe and the history building of the legend. And like I said, he was long game. He is long game. He has a specific goal in mind, but he's patient. He'll get there. And as we get closer to different milestones on that, you'll start seeing a little bit more of that.
Do you think that there are any other possible iterations of Sire that may have came out if things had went differently? Do you think he could have even possibly been a zealot similar to Tanazal?
If the gods had presented themselves as more supportive, if there was more evidence that they were trying to help, versus just the misfortune of getting in the way of Sire's perceived mission, I think the devotion would have stuck around. He may have been a little bit more evolved into a warrior of that god. Stormo being the patron of the Navali, he would have focused more in on that in Stormo's name, and because Tano is Tano, Daystress would have come into play, and there would have been an evolution. So maybe even a multi-class.
That could be interesting.
Yeah, a multi-class Sire would evolve, but it's too late.
So
all the gods are sullied.
Yeah. If Gambit had done his magic similar to how Matt Mercer does his, where if you pray to the gods, even that small prayer may make your hands glow with light slightly, or just simply a sign that shows that patron is seeing your prayer and is answering it, do you think that would be what it would need, or would it be more of you would need the direct attention from a god for that to be the way you were referring?
Yeah, it wouldn't have been direct intervention because he has received signs. They just haven't. He's received signs from Stormo that Stormo doesn't care. the storm that rolled in that killed his brothers, the emblem etched on the fallen Navali village, the outright antagonism that Syr feels, whether it's self-created or not, is a sign from Stormo, which is basically what any kind of sign, historically speaking, has been. Is just, it's either good or bad. It makes you believe in the god or it makes you hate the god. One way or the other, it's going to steer you in a path. And unfortunately, Stormo chose the wrong path, and now he's got to suffer the consequences.
Are there any particular occurrences that Syr has seen as signs or visions, per se, from the gods, or even maybe not even Stormo, but other gods, per se?
No. At this point, he's not looking for any. But the only direct influence that, as Navali, Syr has ever had has been with Stormo. He hasn't asked for help from anybody else. But his path started there. When Syr was a child, his father went out on a hunt and was lost in a storm. And that kind of started the questioning of faith. And then throughout his life, whether it be the fall of the Chosen One, or the deterioration of the Chosen One, I should say, or the misguided advice that Stormo was giving him, just kind of kept pushing him away. So now there's nothing left. He won't listen to the influence of a god, and won't listen to a conversation that involves one, which is kind of what happened in the session with Venumbra. It was snarky and casual and antagonistic until Venumbra clarified he wasn't a god, and then Syr paid attention.
Do you think that the reason that he respects Vulcrum to whatever degree he does, do you think that is a similar reasoning, where he's not a god, but he does offer power?
Yes, the alliance with Vulcrum and with Daystress at this point, Tenazal has his faith, and Syr listens to that, but chooses not to follow it. But there is a debt that's owed. Vulcrum brought Tenazal back to Syr. So there's a loyalty there, but not a fealty. So for now, until he's betrayed, there's a debt that has to be paid. So there's patience that Syr has always had, but he's always watchful, because now he's gotten to the point that he thinks there's an ulterior motive to everything that happens.
Is there anything you think that may even drive a wedge between you and Tenazal, or is that bond forever?
If Tenazal forces me to choose...
You cut off again, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. To choose loyalty to anybody else but him, because I'm no longer important. Syr is no longer important. If I become irrelevant in Tenazal's eyes as Syr, then I'll know that he's lost, and that Syr is now in firm belief. That will be the turning point where he realizes he's now the last Navali, and that's where his focus has to go. He'll be heartbroken, but it would be Tenazal's call before Syr ever changes his mind.
Do you think that there has been any occurrences with him coming back from the dead that has made him question that bond between him and Tenazal?
No. He's, in fact, very grateful to Daystress for allowing it. But he doesn't respect Daystress as a god. He just thanks him for the gift. is the first responder to a question, that couldn't be answered by a mortal. So there's just a gratefulness that he has, that he heard a plea and answered it, even through Vulcrum, to allow Tanazal to come back.
Here's a question. Seeing that Vulcrum, similar to Tanazal, has come back to life multiple times, do you think he views them in the same way, even though one is very physically different, or do you think that there is that like true resurrection versus bastardization?
Sire doesn't really see Vulcrum as an undead. I know he is, but he sees him more as a powerful mortal, especially when we got to the watery tart and he ended up killing himself. But he also saw the responsibility of keeping Tanazal alive, the link between the two of them. He doesn't see Vulcrum in the same light as Tanazal, because Tanazal may be undead, but he's sentient, and he still has the memories of when we were together, in the village, as Navali. Vulcrum is a visitor to that history, that just happened to be the one that brought him back so that we could live on.
Not to completely change topics, but though he's new to the group, do you think that there is a similar bond starting to come between you and Bucyrus as well, or are you not seeing that forming as quickly as, say, with Tanazal?
I see it forming, not as quickly and not in the same way. Sire is still Navali, and coming to grips with the term, coming to grips with the fact that the tribe isn't there anymore, but still keen on the idea that he's responsible for that legacy. He sees Cyrus as the first member of the new Navali, whatever name they end up being, a tribe that can focus their attention and focus their loyalty in the right direction, not jaded by the gods and not overshadowed by this false worship that Sire believes is going on.
Do you think that he has any sort of connection to the name Navali, or do you think it's mainly just if as long as he's in a tribe with him and his friends, that's all that matters?
He'll always be Navali. So no matter what tribe he is in and what tribe decides to name themselves, he's still Navali. And I think it'll get a little spoily if I go any deeper with that answer, because Navali is never going to go away, but it may change a little bit.
Are there any future plans that you think you could mention without it being too risque, per se? Or not risque, but like too letting out too much information.
Oh, that's fine. I don't think I could be any more risque than sitting here without any pants on.
Yeah.
The only thing that I will say, as far as future plans, is that my name is Sire Cap, and you can call me Sire. But beyond that, you get no clues. No clues.
I think that's a good turning point to transition into the second set of questions, which are specifically tailored for you and your character, involving things that have happened in your past and such. First one being how Petable are werebear ears from Red.
All right, Red. First, to clarify, I'm not a werebear. I have a specific personality that allows for me to barely hold it together when I rage.
Barely. Didn't.
Yeah. But as far as being petable, I invite you to give it a shot, and we'll find out together.
Anyway, I threw that one in more for comic relief than anything, but I thought it was cute at the very least. But
yeah, I think over a barbecue or a block party, Red and Sire would have a good time just making fun of everybody else.
Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah, under combat situations, I don't think they'd ever encounter each other, because either Sire would be too busy with somebody else, or Red would be hiding behind the correct tree. I just don't know.
I sort of see what you mean, for sure. Anyway, on to a little bit more of a serious question. We've seen your disposition towards your current situation with Daystress, and even who's been brought back recently. But what would his ideal situation be if he could if everything had went perfectly in his mind?
If everything had gone perfectly, and I'm assuming that implies all the way back to the PvP session.
Possibly even all the way back from the first episode, if you think that it would go that far back.
Oh sure. There were changes from the first session for sure. I think the biggest difference between then and now would be that there would be a lot more focus on the tribe. The Navali would be a lot more notorious, or a little bit more well known, because we would expand more strategically than just kind of wandering all over the map killing everybody. It would have been a more purposeful driven migration of movement, and the purpose would have been well established as to why we were doing it. More recent changes would have started at the PvP session with our new arrival. He feels betrayed again. The gods are taunting him, and now he's staring eye to eye with an enemy, and doesn't know who to blame at this point, other than maybe Vulcrum. And he's got his mixed emotions back because of that.
Do you think that if it had been not of Vulcrums Power that he would have came back, that he wouldn't have just slaughtered Victor there on the beach?
He would have slaughtered Victor on the beach. The volleys don't fail. And the fact that during the PvP session, Victor had already fallen to him once, and gotten away. There was unfinished business, and Sire would have seen that as an opportunity to finish the original plan, to fulfill the obligation.
Seeing that everybody that was in the PvP saw him rise again, do you think there was any special regard he may hold him at, even though he has such a disposition to him?
Yes. In the long run, Victor proved himself to be a very strong warrior. Sire may not like the tribe he came from, so to speak, but he does respect a warrior.
If you're still talking, you cut off.
Yeah. The turning point is going to be when Sire recognizes the warrior aspect of Victor, and that will remind him. So there's hope, but it's going to be a rough road getting there because he's still dealing with a lot of emotional baggage from that fight.
On a slightly different note, I believe we've talked previously about Sire's particular opinion on the sacrifice that was made to bring Victor back, but what do you, assuming that he had known most everything that had happened to and around Tella before his demise, do you think he would have had a particular opinion of him?
No. I think in the eyes of Sire, because he was back in the shadows and not in the center of the confrontation, he would have seen him as a follower, and without a major event to pull him into Sire's attention during combat, it's just another fight. It's not that he would have dismissed Telesi, but he would have been at the time seeing him more as a "you wait there, you're next" kind of fighter as he continued down the line.
Do you think that he has any? Do you think he respects him for his sacrifice, or do you think he was foolish for bringing back somebody and ending his own life in the process?
I don't think you were foolish. I think Sire would react more directly to the fact that you disrespected fair combat. You brought back somebody that had been defeated, and that kind of minimizes the fight and it minimizes the combat that had been fulfilled. In the eyes of a Navali, not just Sire, that is an insult to diminish the honor of being able to die at the hand of a Navali by just bringing them back. We've already discussed that Sire has a problem with magic, and to see that as a reason to betray the outcome would have made him a little grumpy, for sure.
Do you think it would have also more than likely pissed him off a little bit more, seeing that directly before this all happened, he reached to the sky and asked for in Storvo's name to trade places with Victor?
Yes. Given the chance, he would have taken you out before the sacrifice could have been made. You would have become the Avatar.
So, do you think in a different scenario, they could, assuming that things were just vastly different, do you think that theoretically he could have been friends with Sire, like if this confrontation hadn't happened?
I think so. The Navali don't go out to clear villages. They go out to recruit tribe members. There is strength in numbers, so there's always a concentration on making more numbers. If Telesi had proven himself a warrior, and not a magic user, but that's just me, there would have been a chance to join us, to demonstrate that the tribe is more important than a singular belief, and we would have gone from there.
In the alternate situation where the wish either had gone to a different person or hadn't happened in the first place, and the godstones weren't moved around the way they were, Vulcrum has said previously that he most likely would have went and honed in on Buka. Do you think that if at the end of the fight, say, like halfway through, Vulcrum had slain Buka, but then tried to call for peace, do you think that it would have worked for Sire, or would it have taken more than that to calm him down from that point?
At that point, he was still devoted to Buckalasu as the chosen one. He was beginning to grow the anger to Stormo. So there would have been a chance, but I think there would have still been some duel, some grappling that had to be done to keep him off of Vulcrum until at least Vulcrum had a chance to talk to him.
And though this is a bit of a silly question, I'm assuming that the usage of the sleep spell was not at all respected by Sire in any regard, correct?
No, that was a cop-out. That was magic. It wasn't a fight. It was a cheat. And not knowing where it came from, I don't think Sire would have seen the origin. But knowing that the storm was still raging when he did collapse, he would have seen it, I think, as an influence of Stormo, and that would have escalated things.
Do you think had he been, say, captured as a prisoner, he would have still resisted, or would he have tried to wait for the ideal time to free himself?
He would have resisted. The Navali don't stop fighting, and that's pretty much true to this day. There isn't really a chance in combat for Sire to just say, I'm tired, I changed my mind. He would have kept fighting. I don't think it would have had to have been pretty strong rope to keep Sire from an attempt to keep quiet. There would have always been an aggression there.
Here's a question. Speaking of rope, does Sire have any particular opinion on, assuming that you have the out of character knowledge of what's happened to Vaso? Would he have any particular opinion on Vaso?
Out of character knowledge, I think Vaso and Sire have a chance of being allies. There's enough antagonism there towards the gods that it could be an interesting conversation. Sire still carries a length of Navali rope. It's not even primitive rope. It's Navali rope, and it would have been a good conversation piece. And it could still be if he has it, if Vaso and I ever meet. But I think we'd have a chance to have a pretty good conversation, but it would take some interesting encounter logistics to see in the proper light, rather than fight. So we'd have to witness each other demonstrating our beliefs.
Yeah, which would be
to be able to survive. Yeah, to be able to survive long enough to talk to each other.
Do you think if that did happen and he mentioned his aversion to magic, do you think he could have related on that point, or is your aversion more towards the gods and less towards magic itself?
No, there's a separation. Sire knows that magic is not a godly power, is not an immortal power. He sees it. He doesn't know where it comes from, but he doesn't believe that it comes from the gods. He hasn't run into a situation where anything demonstrates that it's been given to them by the gods. Whereas the gods' power are any influences, the storm, the tidal waves, the rain, the natural provisions of what a god would do to the world, or all around him. So this magic thing is different, and it's new, and he doesn't like it because nothing good has happened with it yet. In his, but he has no interest in it. There's just no reason to have magic, because the rage has given him enough power to walk his mission, and that's all he needs right now. He sees no purpose for it.
Interesting. Let's go ahead and real quick go on to the next question since we're here. How has seeing his fallen brothers then come back, excuse me, I cannot speak today. How has seeing his brothers fall then come back affected Syre's mental state, if at all?
It was a relief. We touched on this a little bit. It was he hasn't recovered all of his brothers, one of which is irrelevant at this point. But Tanazal coming back was a gift, and it was enough to entertain a conversation about Daystress with Daystress, and pledge a level of loyalty that I don't think he would have provided a silly god, if the situation had been different. If Tanazal hadn't been risen, it was just Vulcrum saying, "Here, talk to this guy for me." The outcome would have been different.
Do you think that he sees what's happened to Tanazal as at all a bad thing, or does he just see it as Daystress willed him to be alive?
I think Tanazal had unfinished business. He came back because there was still work to do, and Sire respects that. On top of the brotherhood that he already feels, there wasn't really any hesitation when he saw Tanazal. All of the loyalty returned. There was no consideration beyond that, and I don't think he'd be capable of it as a member of the 8-Ball crew. He wouldn't grasp that there's anything different to Tanazal other than he smells funny at this point. But he's still Tanazal. Now, if he would have been a drooling, growling,
You cut off again.
Tanazal came back as a sentient form, and the loyalty came back with it. He was just a drier, beef jerkier kind of brotherhood, but he was still Tanazal, and there was just Sire would never question that. Tanazal is Tanazal.
So even though he may have been considered, say, a monster by other people, he doesn't see it that way. He sees it as his brother has been returned to him.
Exactly. I mean, Sire has been considered a monster to people. There is no impression within the Navali tribe of each other of ever being a monster. That is simply what the Navali are. And to each other, it's the loyalty and the camaraderie that they shared as being part of the same tribe that counts. The outward impression doesn't exist within the tribe. We don't see ourselves as the early representations had put us. We are simply Navali. We're in it together.
Here's a question. How do you see Sire's mental or moral compass? Do you think that it's similar to say the Gods and Guards, where it's a little bit more let's do what's right if we can, or is it more on the side of I do what I want for myself when I want to?
I think it's kind of a mix of both. Sire's only outlook right now is the defeat of the silly gods. Magic is irrelevant. He has no use for it and doesn't have to acknowledge it because it's just there. But his moral compass is one of two considerations. Either you're willing to listen to me and possibly join my quest to defeat the gods, or you're in my way. It's not that I see good or evil. It's that I have a specific mission. And as mentally based as that may be, you're either with me or you're in my way, and I need to move you. That's the only consideration he has right now.
Do you think that his overall end goal is to eventually defeat Stormo, or do you think it's something slightly different?
He would have no problem whatsoever in defeating Stormo, in the literal sense. I shouldn't say no problem. He would have no qualms if that situation ever came up. The sense of being able to defeat him would also be demonstrated if he succeeded in spite of the signs. If Sire creates a village and it's, or if Sire
you cut off again after and it's.
Yeah, if Sire, in spite of Stormo, it's literally either beating him or demonstrating that I can survive without him. It's both of them are equal in his eyes at this point. Right now, he'd rather defeat him. But if he builds a village and the village survives the storm, the tidal wave doesn't sink the boat, the volcano doesn't send lava his way, he will see that, Sire will see that as defeating Stormo in a more figurative sense, and that helps his mentality. Just like seeing the storm, in PvP. Back to that's the big one. All the bad things that happened didn't happen to him. So Sire sees that as Stormo, not even seeing him as a rival. But now it's starting to evolve into Stormo's afraid of Sire, and that the longer that Sire stays alive, the longer Stormo will survive, because now it's getting to the point that Sire is getting more serious with this mission, and that one day, when he's old and gray, he's going to pass on to the afterlife and start knocking on doors, because the battle isn't over yet. So he doesn't see it as a chance to win or lose. It's one way or the other. Stormo is going to go. There is no alternative.
Given what happened in one of the most recent sessions where you almost didn't make it, had he died there, would you have still felt that you got your full, you got everything you wanted out of the character, even if they had died there?
I do. I've always been ready to let Sire go. I have from day one, because that's what tribals do. But I think there wouldn't have been a better way to end Sire in his evolution as a character. There wouldn't have been a better way to end Sire as the image of him in the afterlife, kicking in Stormo's door. The legend would have been passed down that every time every time the thunderstorm rolled over, every time the lightning flashed, it's because the fight was still going on. And Sire is still up there kicking his ass.
That is honestly an amazing analogy. And I just love that image of literally as he passes away on the physical plane, even though it's perfectly sunny out, a bolt of lightning shoots across the sky or something. I think that would have been a very poetic ending to your character. But I am very glad to see your character survive, and I am very excited to see what he may do in this next episode. But let's go ahead and go to the next question real quick.
Sure.
What does Syr think of the most recent session just as a whole, like the occurrences that happened in it, everything?
Sire's a little annoyed that there's still these little godlings out and about pretending to be important. But it gave him more information that he didn't have before. He has confirmation that the god.
You cut off after that. The gods.
Oh, it's no. He's got confirmation that the gods are false. By the words of Venumbra, who in that conversation also said they're not a god, and they don't need worship, and they don't want to worship them. It's not a requirement. That caught Sir's attention, but he held on to that phrase that the gods aren't real, and he's motivated to find out more about this, because even if Venumbra isn't a god, there's a demonstrated power there, but there's also a respect because of the honest impression that Venumbra was providing. They weren't pretending to be something they're not, like Stormo does. Worship me or I'll strike you with lightning. Ooh, I'm scared. Venumbra was being honest and asking for help, and that triggered in Syr that there is a chance to fight because power was offered. So there's a motivation there that wasn't there before, in the name of what was perceived as a god. But Syr has confirmation now that they aren't, but even more so that they can fight for a reason, and it will help in the long run. So he's focused in on it.
Do you think that even just the occurrence, like the very brief exchange you've had with your newfound friend on the beach with the axe, though your confrontation was short, do you think that his opinion of Victor could change, or that it's generally speaking pretty much on the side of you were my enemy and you will be my enemy until I put you in the ground again?
He's still an enemy, but the conversation has taken a turn. There are spoilers involved, so I won't go too deep into this. But there's more to discuss. But the fact that Syr and Victor are now being able to discuss it means that progress can be made. We just have to see where it goes. But having said that, Syr will take every opportunity he can to aggravate the hell out of him, because he is an enemy. And if he gets upset, so what? He's dead.
With him also slowing down the group, having to carry this large axe and having a reduced movement speed, do you think that increases the annoyance in him, or it's seen more as a haha, look, you get to sit way the fuck back there.
I think Cyrus specifically said that, that in life he was just as weak, from what he can recall. I don't think he has as much of an issue with Victor being slow as the fact that as they walk, the crocodile is still back there too. He has a bigger issue with the crocodile than he does with Victor, because of everything that happened during that fight.
Of course,
he's not big. He's not big on the alligator. But for now, there's a patient for it. But having said that, we're running into a situation where speed is of the essence. We now have something that's also important to Sire at risk, with the smoke rising. And we need to find out what's going on. And if somebody is slowing us down, then Sire is going to get a little aggravated.
Do you think that Syr is not necessarily on a time crunch, but is looking to get things done as quickly as possible?
No. He's not in a hurry. He wants it done the right way, because doing it correctly, doing it without a dependency on divine intervention, or magic, from what he's seen. Without that dependency, he knows that the foundation of anything that's being built now takes time. And he's always had the mentality of the future, of his memory, of his legend, and an underlying goal of being able to say, in history, when this fantastic thing happened for this tribe, I was there. He's waiting for that opportunity, so he doesn't want to rush it, but he also doesn't want to give it away. He doesn't want the gods to jump on the opportunity to claim that benefit. So he's biding his time, but making sure that he's separating himself from the silly gods.
Does Syr want to have fame, or is it more of he wants to be revered as somebody who could crush you if he wanted to, sort of thing?
He doesn't want to be feared. That kind of, you just muted yourself. That kind of happens on its own. Syr is more interested in making himself a memory, to be able to establish a legend in whatever tribe comes to pass, of being a foundation block in what comes after, whether it be important or not. He wants to be the origin of a story that's told, that survives, even if he doesn't.
Gotcha. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question then, real quick. Which of your companions is the smelliest from Rip?
Oh, that's Tanazal.
Tanazal? 100%.
Yeah, that's Tanazal. I won't get close enough to check with the crocodile. Wedge is just kind of a zombie, and I don't pay him any attention. But Tanazal, in his repeated attempts to dehumidify and deodorize himself, hasn't taken into consideration from a medicine, a plant collector, that plants eventually rot, and then stop helping. So it's a constant battle. But he's still Tanazal. He's still my brother.
Do you think that Syr may even be able to help with that situation, should they need to travel incognito and not have people immediately try and kill Tanazal for being an undead?
Oh, yes. He's very conscious, especially now after the couple of village encounters. He's very conscious of what Tanazal's impression is when somebody new encounters him. So he's always got in the back of his head, ideas of how to conceal, not only for the sake of me being Navali, but for Tanazal being undead. The whole group needs to be kind of camouflaged. So there's always ideas, but going back to the 8 Ball crew, they're not always good ideas. That's just kind of the best he can do.
Yeah, good ideas is short to come by in such a low intelligence group. Not to say anything bad about you, but let's go ahead and move on to a little bit more of a serious question. Though Syr dealt the killing blow to Zando, if Vulcrums hadn't tried first, would he have acted differently?
Yes, he would have. The only reason that Syr went after Zando was being devoted to the Chosen One at the time. He reacted to the remark that the Navali never fail, that failure is unforgivable. And this plays into his guilt about the 2 fallen villages now, not only the Navali village, but the river village as well. The only savings grace is that there are typically no survivors to hold him accountable to it. But it's the failure is what set off Syr to take out. It wasn't the zealotry of Vulcrums. It was just the fact that Buck was actually right on that point. Zando failed. He's got to go.
Do you think that he would have reacted more honorfully, I guess, per se?
Yes, he would have. Given the chance and a little bit more of a conversation with the Bone Man, there would have been a specific and accepted challenge to that. He wouldn't have been questing to lead the tribe as much as punish the failure.
Do you think that Zando's failure, the only result that would have come out of that is his death, or do you think he could have been punished in a different manner, but let live?
No, it would have been his death, because not only did he fail in the eyes of the Navali, he was also seen as the son of Stormo, and that resentment was always there because of Syr's father. So there would have been a reason to get even with Stormo. Taking somebody that Syr loves, Syr would return the favor, but that would have changed the entire outcome, because at that point the antagonism would have subsided, because the anger would have been addressed. He would have had his revenge for his father. So I don't know if Syr would have been just as mad as he is now with the gods. So there's a big difference there.
That is very interesting to think about, actually. Let's go ahead and move up to this question. With Syr being a big fan of the Bone Man, did he hold anything against Dagatoga for killing him when he did, and in the way he did?
Syr was shocked that action had taken place. In hindsight, there was resentment. But he wasn't at the time in a position to confront it, because he was still following Vulcrums. As time changed, the only reason that resentment didn't return after the storm was because of the wish spell, which had changed the Chosen One to Dagatoga, and then the blind loyalty had shifted, and there was no way for him to maintain anger for something the Chosen One had done.
Do you think that if things if he hadn't been made the chosen one, do you think that he may have treated Degatoga with different reverence, possibly even plotting some sort of revenge, even if on a smaller scale?
Yeah, there would have been a payback that was needed. It wouldn't have been at the level of revenge because the whole leadership scheme was changing at the time. If things had remained the same, I think I would have, or Sire would have shifted into more of a subterfuge to be a little bit more sneaky in revenge. It could have been as simple as, oh, you're in a fight. Oh, well, I'm a little busy to help. I'll just wait over here, until you're done, and kind of a passive aggressive kind of revenge. But it's hard to say.
So you don't necessarily think that he would, like Scar from the Lion King, long live the king, and then throw him off of the ledge, but make it look like an accident, sort of thing?
No. Degatoga was still a warrior, and Sire, above all else, respects the warrior mentality. So the motivation he doesn't necessarily need to understand. And Sire, being Sire, wouldn't have questioned the act until he found out what the motivation was. And then the justification would have had to been presented. So the act of killing the Bone Man didn't set him off, mainly because Degatoga never really explained why, other than Xander. And at that point, leadership was changing. And Cyrus saw the Bone Man as leadership. So there was enough justification to subdue him at that point. But as time went on, motivations would have come back into play, and he may or may not have had a problem with that.
Here's a question. Though he was sort of a short edition and was rather, say, naive to the situation, do you think, what was Sire's thoughts on Gore and his actions between that fight against all of the leaders and the PvP?
His impression of Gore was of a little kid. He was a newer member to the tribe, and he saw him as a young one. Naive is a very good word for that. He had patience to let Gore make the mistakes. He wasn't judging him at that point, and unfortunately, he didn't survive long enough to be judged.
Do you think if Gore had survived the fight, that they would still be? Do you think that the connection would have grown to the point of, say, him and Tanazal? Did I? Oh, wait, give me just a second. I think I hit a wrong button. Say something? Okay.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I accidentally deafened myself because I hit the wrong button. But yes, could you restate whatever you said about my previous question?
Yeah. I mean, basically, Sire saw Gore as a child, as a rookie, not necessarily a warrior, but one trying to be. So he had a patience with Gore. He wasn't in a position to judge him. He was letting him make his own mistakes. And unfortunately, Gore made one too many, and ended up dying, which is just kind of the way it is.
Do you think that he, seeing how he killed Victor, do you think he would have still respected him the way he did? Or the way not respected him, but treated him with the same reverence of, oh, he's just a child and this is him making a mistake? Or do you think it would have been more along the lines of, that was very dishonorable and I'm going to treat you differently as such?
It would have been, yes. It would have been the opportunity to instruct him on the proper etiquette of combat, of the Navali way. We may be indiscriminate when we fight, but there's still an honor to how we kill. So it would have been a teaching moment, and just the way it is when somebody grows in the tribe. That's just what you do. And then I think Gore, in the long run, would have shifted his ambition to proving himself, which is the rite of passage for a warrior, and that would have gained respect in the long run. He just never got the chance to do it.
If he had survived that encounter, do you think, since he was such a follower, he would have still ended up in your current group, or do you think he would have likely retired his character to different means, if you had to guess?
That's a tough one. I don't know what the motivation of him originally joining was. I think that if we could have refocused our priority and stabilized our mentality, I think it would have been enjoyable. I think part of the misfortune of his timing was coming in the probably the most chaotic point that Navali have faced so far as a brand new player, and that kind of threw him off a little bit. If he had survived, and everything else had remained just as it has, I think if he was still playing today, he would be part of the group. He would still be enjoying it.
Yeah, I could definitely see that group dynamic working as well, with Sire having even like his own little protege per se. I think that would be an interesting dynamic for sure. Go ahead and...
Yeah, I think so.
Good. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying, yeah, I believe so. I think it would have garnered some attention to turning Syr into more of a mentor to a youngling, but it also would have subdued some of the anger because it would have taken some of his attention away from the signs, and he wouldn't have had the chance to see the interpretations of everything bad happening. He wouldn't have seen the gods taunting him, or the bad signs that the gods had provided. It may have changed his whole outlook. I don't know.
That is very... I know I keep saying this, but that is a very interesting thing to think about. If he was still around, how he would fit into the group dynamic. But let's go ahead and real quick move on to the next question. What are Syr's thoughts on Venumbra, and even more specifically his effects on the different party members, such as like the 100-foot barrier between the party members and Vulcrum especially?
I don't think Venumbra has affected that. I think that it has in a way, trapped us. Now that Victor and Vulcrum and Tenazal all have to stay within 100 feet of each other, as a party, we're kind of hamstrung into sticking together, to the point that splitting the party could be a catastrophe, just from the balance of power. If something bad happens, it's touch and go at this point. Not a lot has happened, so I can't really gauge how anybody's going to react to it yet, because it hasn't really interfered with anything. But it's just, I can't pass a judgment on a good or a bad thing with Venumbra until something else happens to steer my opinion. For now, it's just the way it is. We just have to see how it fits in.
So if theoretically Vulcrum had gotten, say, banished or even just dragged far enough away from the other two, and Tanazal were to fall because of it, would he blame Vulcrum, or would he generally more blame the person who banished him, or even just if he happened to walk too far away?
It would depend on the cause. If it ends up being just a random event, something out of the control of mortal man, he would blame it on Daystress, forsaking a condition that he set forth, of creating a situation where they had to break their only rule. He would have blamed Daystress, and that will expand Syre's opinion of the gods. If it's another mortal, whether it be enemy or player or NPC or natural disaster, I'd need more information for Syre. He would blame somebody again for the loss of Tano, but it would also focus him in on finding a way to retrieve that, if possible, of looking for help or looking for a way to solve the problem, even if it's in desperation. There's specific things that Sire would do, but I don't want to get into that because that would kind of spoil things.
Of course. Let's go ahead and hop over to this question, which is from Blue, and is a bit more of a question for anybody who's not particularly familiar with things of his of Sire's character. Why does Syr have such an aversion to the gods still after seeing Venumbra's power, and will that aversion ever change?
Syr is jaded enough that opinion will never change. The gods are irrelevant. They are petty. They are children throwing tantrums. They are not the influence that they present themselves to be. They're selfish. Venumbra, and in the conversation, without spoiling the conversation, Syr gathered enough information to convince himself that Venumbra is not a god, and whether correct or not, who knows? But his interpretation of it gave him enough motivation to see Venumbra in a different light, which kind of evolved the conversation, but it eliminated that animosity, and at least gave Venumbra enough of a chance to have a discussion, which is exactly what Syr needed to get enough information to form an opinion that allowed him to be amicable to the situation, and we proceeded from there. So Venumbra right now is a toleration, but not anything desiring or deserving of worship. He's just he. Venumbra is just there as a quest giver, and Syr is willing to take the quest.
Do you think that there's anything that Venumbra could do to even say uh, assuage your position on worship? Theoretically, even getting Syr to to worship and pray to Venumbra.
No, Syr will never pray to a god, and Venumbra is not a god. They've already confessed that. So that manipulation would set Syr off, but not as an anger that he demonstrates towards the gods. That would be an anger based on an entity that Venumbra has presented himself as, or herself, or theirselves, whatever Venumbra is. Syr sees Venumbra as a real thing. And if that betrayal ever takes place, then Syr has something real to combat, and he won't hesitate.
Gotcha. Real quick, let's go ahead and hop over to this one, which is from Bucyrus. Syr saw Vulcrum bring back an enemy of his. Will this betrayal make him trust Vulcrum less forever, or is this more of a thing that could be corrected with time?
It was discussed in session. So in time, Vulcrum has a chance to recover that level of trust. But Syr's watching. Just as only took one substantial betrayal of Stormo to set him down this path. It only took one substantial betrayal of Vulcrum. Actually, yeah, this is a betrayal. It's just as it only took one betrayal of Vulcrum to start him down the path. It would take a recovery. It would take a demonstration of intention without another indication of betrayal to lose Vulcrum, or lose Syr's faith forever.
Do you think that there is anything that he theoretically could do that would cause Syr to just completely never trust him again?
He could abandon Tanazal before Tanazal had a chance to sever the tether on his own. That is a major betrayal, because that is the basis of Syr's loyalty. Is his gratefulness of bringing Tanazal back allowed Syr to pledge loyalty. If that's betrayed, then there's no reason for that, and even more reason to combat Vulcrum.
Would he worship Daystress if it meant that it could save Tanazal, theoretically?
He would pledge loyalty. He would not pledge fealty. The word worship and the presentation of themselves as a god would shut Syr down. But he would be willing to work in that name or under that name for the chance of fulfilling that promise. If Daystress offered Syr the chance to free Tanazal, Syr would take that chance, but not in the name of worship, but more in the name of the quest.
So if it came down to it, and it was either pledge fealty to me or Tanazal will be forever gone, he would still let his brother go? If that's what it came down to?
Yeah, Sire would have no choice. He will not worship a silly god. But he would make it perfectly clear that if the pettiness of that offer is a deal breaker, I've already got a list of gods that I would like to have a chat with. And he would have no problem putting Daystress on that list as his army builds in his mind and in reality to one day fight Stormo. Sire would have no problem whatsoever in establishing Daystress as you're next, on that list, and living his life with that belief, with that loyalty to that quest.
That is a lot to think about, for sure.
I think a lot of it has to do with just the fact that his outlook on the gods is they don't deserve respect. They can blame Stormo if they want and have their own conversations with him, but because of Stormo, none of the gods will gain the respect of Sire ever, and they've ruined that chance. Stormo has ruined that chance for them. So in essence, he's turning the other gods into enemies of Stormo as well. If Sire is important to the other gods, they can blame Stormo and join Sire's army to punish Stormo for what he's done. So there's a motivation, there's an ulterior motive there in his attitude, and that's just going to expand. It's stand with me because this is what Stormo did. If you want to pretend to be just like Stormo, you're going to get the same. That is the basis of his entire mentality when he encounters a god.
That is very interesting to think about, that he would even say take the aid of a separate god if it meant that it would help him in a fight against Stormo. That is interesting to think about. Unless I'm misinterpreting that a bit.
No, that's exactly right. Because even though he doesn't see the gods as gods, he sees them as if somebody comes up looking for Sire in the name of godliness, Sire has a level of antagonism that will explain to whoever. Well, you can blame Stormo. That's why I won't mow your lawn. You can go yell at him, because even if they're not real, in Sire's mind, it's just another fight that Stormo has to have, and that's a payback. That's that passive aggressive revenge that I was talking about. It's a fight that Stormo's going to have in my name, in Sire's name, with fellow gods because of what he did. He's being punished.
Interesting.
Not only by me, but by everybody that I encounter.
That is a very unique way of thinking about things, and I like that. But this next question was actually one that I had, which was with his tribe killed and the last of his remaining brother and undead. What does Syr have left, and what keeps him going in such a bleak situation?
That is a tough one. Syr doesn't really see it as bleak as much as an almost defeat. The Navali aren't dead as long as he's alive. So there's always a chance With Tanazal by his side, figuratively speaking, he still feels complete as a Navali. The situation hasn't changed, so I don't know how Sire would react to being literally the last Navali. He doesn't see that yet, but he's still got the motivation to have the tribe survive, and it's not that it's a defeat. It's not that it's bleak. It's just the workload has changed. There's a bigger job to do than under ideal circumstances, but it's still a job that Sire wanted to do, and the Navali will survive. In what form? Don't know yet, but they will survive.
So does he see the resurrection of Tanazal possibly as a not necessarily a loss, but like a loss then recovery per se?
He sees it as a sign of if nothing else, he sees it as a sign of hope, that the Navali will never die easily. There will always be a way for us to come back. He saw that when Tano walked into view. He saw that as a signal that the Navali could still come back. That just as he fell and rose again, so can the tribe, in a manner of speaking. But Sire still has his mission, and he's working towards that end, dependent on that signal, just like Tano. The Navali fell, but that doesn't mean that they can't come back. The variable is going to be the form that they come back in, and that's where the growth takes place.
Is there any particular manner in which the Navali could come back that you think Sire would disapprove of?
I think any form of zealotry, any form of a god-based civilization, a god-based belief structure, would be a problem for Sire. In fact, there's no doubt whatsoever that would be a problem. I think it's a matter of loyalty to each other, the strength. I think the biggest, the closest comparison that I would have would be to the ancient Polynesian sailors that, as tribes, would travel the ocean, not in pursuit of a deity, or not in pursuit of an afterlife, but in pursuit of a better life for the tribe. And they always operated as one, as one being, and watching over each other. That would be Sire's main goal, is to create a new Navali that is kind of almost a mirror image of the combative Navali. Because all they did, with a connection to the gods, it was great to tribalism. It would just be more focused on a family, of a home.
Well, that's the last of the questions, but it's been very, very interesting to sit down and have a sort of deeper look into what Sire is as a person, and his different perspectives on things and opinions on different people. I think that it's been very, very Very
I can't tell
informative.
if you're muted or I'm muted.
I don't think I'm muted. I am not muted.
Now I can hear you.
Okay, but yeah, it's been very interesting to sit down and talk about uh, like just Sire and his perspective on things, his opinion on different people. I think anybody who watches this will definitely have a little bit of a deeper view of Sire and what he is as a character.
I hope it provokes more questions. There's a lot of thought that, just speaking of D&D in general, there's a lot of thought that goes into anybody's development of character, and I've always been the type of player that puts a lot of thought, and I hope it shows when I'm playing. A lot of thought into the motivations of a character, not just the actions. And he's not playing for a specific session. He's always planning ahead, and seeing what the future holds, and always has his eye on the future. And not really grasping what's happening around him. So it doesn't have to be centered on a present day decision, but there's always a consequence, and I like that conversation. So I think this is a great idea for a first session. I think it went well.
I think it did as well, and I think uh, just as like a sort of pilot episode, this went far smoother than I thought it would. To be honest, I was dreading thinking about if it were to sort of fall apart in my hands, but I'm glad that it didn't.
Well, the next time the Gambit complains about dead air, I mean, just kind of speak kindly of me, that it's not necessarily my fault.
No, actually, it's not. For the most part, the only time it was dead air was technical difficulties. To be honest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of thought that goes into playing in a character, and as you start interviewing the other characters, there's going to be a lot of indications of not just what they look like or what they're feeling, but there's going to be an investment in who the characters really are, and that's the fun part of D&D, in my opinion. Is it's totally pointless, because in theory your character can die tomorrow, but it's to have that level of devotion to a character, and that investment in the thinking is a testament not only to the player but also to Gambit to inspire that, and that's what I admire in this campaign, and that's what hooked me, is that it gave me a chance to explore parts of a character that I had never explored as a dungeon master, and it's super enticing, and it's great entertainment, and I hope a lot of people join us.
I do as
Not
well.
only, yeah, not only here in the interviews, but as players, because I think everybody deserves a chance to dig deep into these character sheets, and not be afraid to just explore the hidden motivations and the ideas behind the character, and not just the stats,
Well,
because it's so much fun.
it's similar to how Farce put it the other day, which is you have to make a character knowing that the first session you might end up being the first one dead, and you have to be okay with that and be able to get back up afterwards and make another character and go right back in there with the same gusto, the same drive as you did last time to make something that is more than just a surface character.
Right. Yeah, your character will never be a piece of paper unless you make it a piece of paper. If you have that investment, it's an emotional connection, without getting unstable and mental about it. There's an emotional connection to that character, and an investment in the story, in the group, and I think it's a big contribution to the campaign. And I hope everybody gets a chance to do that. And speaking of Vaso, just for the record, the first time that Sire ever sees him, he's going to call him Lefty, and that's now canon. So I look forward to it.
That is amazing, and I am also looking forward to it. But for anybody who's watching